Hello and welcome to another episode of Study Sessions, or more specifically, Baughcuts. Now, these are short, 10-minute length episodes where we look in detail at the moment, going through the poems of the poetry anthology. We look at the title, then we look at three key quotations from the beginning, the middle, and the end of the poem. So today's episode is all about The Émigrée by Carol Rumens, and we're going to start with that title. The title is a really significant element of the poem, and what it does is, for us as readers, is immediately indicates the speaker's displacement, but also gets us to think about those key themes: memory, identity, and conflict. We should note that we've got the use of the French term. It's the word is émigré, and it's the feminine form. So that does position the speaker as a woman who's left her homeland. And obviously, when we're thinking about the émigré experience, we're thinking about those who are forced to leave for political or social reasons. And clearly, then, there is a struggle that we might anticipate in the poem between reconciling her memories, which the poem is very, very much focused on, but also the reality of her exile. The fact that the author, the poet, Carol Rumens, uses the feminine form, I think also is designed to get us to think about female experience, the experience of women and displacement, really, really important too. So we want to be thinking about displacement. We want to be thinking about loss in this poem. Those are some of the poem's central themes. Remember, we've got the experience of an individual forced to leave their homeland and having to grapple with the complexities of a new life. But we're also thinking about, from the title, memory and identity. The title itself highlights the speaker's relationship with her past, suggesting that her homeland, even if now distant and potentially changed, sick with tyrants, to quote the poem, it remains a really powerful source of identity and of memory. We want to be thinking about conflict and tension. So that French term, when we combine that with the poem's exploration of war and tyranny and the question of cultural difference, we get that real sense of conflict and tension between the speaker's past and present, and also the challenges for the emigrant, for an émigré, the challenges of navigating a new and potentially hostile environment. And then I want to come to something else that's really important: the émigré. So it's unnamed. It doesn't say the émigré from a specific place, okay? It's just the émigré. Now, the definite article, it sort of holds up the émigré as a type or category of person, gets us to think about them on a universal level. So there's an ambiguity to the title, the émigré. Who are they? Where they had to come from? And the poem actually doesn't address that. But there is also a strong sense of universality. It's an unnamed city, remember, in the poem, it's an unnamed country. So it does seem very specific. The speaker's experiences seem specific, but the poem opens itself up to a more universal interpretation. And I think what that does is it causes the poem to resonate with anyone who has experienced displacement and that longing for home, but also, even if we've never experienced it, to think about what that must be like, and to think about all of the people across human history who have had that emigrant experience, who have had that forced displacement for social or political reasons, who've had that experience of exile. So that's the title. We're going to move on now to the three quotations. And I want to start with that important line, that opening line. There once was a country, I left it as a child. The poem begins like a fairy tale. And obviously, I left it as a child. There once was a country. We're thinking about memory too. It introduces a powerful tone of nostalgia and that childlike, story-like longing. We've got ellipsis. The ellipsis after the phrase, there once was a country, I left it as a child, that indicates an unfinished thought or a pause filled with emotion. It's as if the speaker is wistfully trailing off, recalling a place that no longer exists, as she remembers. I left it as a child perhaps conveys that the speaker was forced to flee her homeland in childhood, setting up again those themes of exile and memory. Because she was a child, her memories of that country are likely idealized, romanticized, and rather innocent. This opening line establishes the core conflict of the poem, the tension between the speaker's cherished memory, perhaps idealized memory, of her homeland, and the reality that it was abandoned, implying conflict, oppression, tyranny, and all those sorts of things. The fairy tale opening also suggests the poem's going to explore how memory can mythologize, can change our understanding of a place. So those themes of identity and memory are foregrounded in the opening. Her identity now is deeply tied to the country of her childhood, and the rest of the poem delves into how that memory persists. So that storybook phrasing contrasts with the implied backdrop of political conflicts she's had to leave, and that highlights, I think, Rumens' message about the enduring childlike love for one's origin, even when reality, harsh, unpleasant, dark reality, intervenes. It's an opening that sets a bittersweet, reflective mood that carries on throughout the course of the poem. Okay, second quotation. I am branded by an impression of sunlight. So here the speaker describes how the homeland's memory marks her permanently. That verb, branded, is very powerful. The word branded, the verb branded, usually means burned into the skin, as farmers brand livestock as a mark of ownership. It suggests that her past identity literally is kind of seared into her. However, what she's branded with, curiously, is an impression of sunlight. That's a rather gentle, positive image. Sunlight we might think of as symbolizing happiness, hope, optimism, but also clarity. That there's something oxymoronic here, a painful branding, but painfully branded by something life-giving like sunlight. And it again highlights a central theme. The memory of her country is both beautiful, but also indelible, inescapable. Branded implies the memory is painful. It is, as I've said, that indelible mark that seems to set her apart in her new city or cause those feelings of longing. It's a line that ties to memory's power and that idealization and the romanticizing of the past. Despite any conflict or tyranny that seems to plague her homeland now, sick with tyrants, for example, her recollections are filled with light. The phrase suggests her identity is strongly shaped by this sunny impression. It's a permanent identity marker. There's also something of a subtext of power going on. That word branded implies being claimed or marked by something bigger, larger than oneself. In a sense, then, her positive memories claim authority over her perceptions, regardless of others' reality. Rumens repeats this motif of sunlight throughout the poem, and this particular quotation, I think, encapsulates how the speaker carries an inner light, what we might think of as her nostalgic vision that actually defines her. It beautifully conveys the conflict between the bright inner psychological world and those dark external truths. Again, aligning with themes of memory versus reality, but also, optimistically, the resilience of hope. Final quotation, quote, they accuse me of absence, they circle me. In this line, the tone shifts markedly to one of threat and persecution of the speaker. They is unspecified, purposely so, likely figures of authority or locals, either in their homeland of their childhood or indeed where they are living now in their new land that they're living in. And it creates a sense of hostility, of mistrust. Accuse me of absence suggests that because her heart and mind are still with her homeland, as if she's somehow kind of mentally absent, she's viewed with suspicion or maybe not seen as fully part of the new society she's living in. But it might also, it's rather ambiguous, it might also hint that in her absence from her homeland, she's considered some kind of traitor or she is indeed unwelcome somewhere else. But most directly, it reads as an accusation that she doesn't belong. They circle me is predatory imagery, very clearly, like wolves or somehow like interrogators encircling a target. It conveys that feeling of entrapment, feeling of oppression, feeling of conflict. The speaker's under scrutiny and feels besieged. The use of the present tense here makes the threat feel all the more immediate. It's a quotation then that ties into those themes of identity but also otherness. Her retained love for her former country sets her apart. It makes her an outsider, but an outsider in her old homeland and her new homeland where she's living now. It also touches on power and oppression. That unnamed they exerts power, trying to intimidate or judge her. The tone is defensive, it's anxious, contrasting with the warmth of her memories. In the broader context of the poem, then, lines like this show how the authority in her current city, perhaps a free city that ironically doesn't seem to tolerate her connection to elsewhere, how that conflicts with her personal truth. The image of being circled underscores that idea of conflict between personal memory and public perception. Despite them, the nameless they, accusing and encircling the speaker's inner world, as shown by the other quotes, that inner world remains defined by the sunlight of her past. And so, this line highlights the clash between external reality, maybe political suspicion, maybe xenophobia she's experiencing in her new land, but also that internal landscape of nostalgia. It reinforces then the poem's message about the challenges faced by the émigrée of the title, by people who've been forced into exile. They carry a beloved past that can make them a target in the present.